hormone being secreted there as a primary hormone. So there are some variations as far as this, but this basically summarizes everything we're going to be talking about as far as endocrinology, this particular course, okay? So that's basically what we're going to look at. We're going to start at the top right now, the hypothalamus. Remember, it's located at the base of the brain, and it's just like all the nervous tissue. It's nuclei, fibers of passage, as we call it, axons, dendrites, all that good stuff. It provides interface basically between the nervous and the endocrine systems. And so, a lot of your regulation of endocrine release depends upon what your brain is perceiving is going on, or what your different sensors are perceiving. And so the hypothalamus acts as the intermediate to connect these incoming sensations with response in the endocrine system. Now, it has an integrated site for sensory, as we say, motor, chemical reactions. This includes osmoreceptors, chemoreceptors, all this type of thing. It also is involved in the autonomic regulation of the autonomic nervous system. You know about the vagus and all that, right? And it also is the master of the pituitary. So we mean that by the pituitary secretes its hormones in response to the stimulating hormones that come from the hypothalamus. So there's specific ones that come out that regulate the secretion of specific types of cells in the pituitary, so you get your particular type of hormone being produced. And these hormones are peptides and amines. They don't produce steroid hormones at this level. Okay? Now, as far as where it's located, remember it's the base of the brain. It's on the ventral diencephalon, which is basically a subdivision of the proencephalon, or the forebrain. Y'all remember all this terminology, right? Okay. The hypothalamus is limited rostrally by the optic chiasma, caudally by the mammillary processes, and laterally by the temporal lobes, and dorsally by the thalamus. In other words, cerebellum and cerebrum, cerebellum's behind it, cerebrum's over top of it, lobes come down, and it's in that the indentation underneath the cerebral hemispheres is where we find it. Okay, ventrally it continues through the infundibulum, and this is the process which comes down and connects it to the pituitary. So the infundibulum is basically the pituitary stalk, and that's what the pituitary hangs off of down in there. Okay. This is just showing you where it is in there. Hypothalamus is the area underneath the third ventricle, and it's basically the pituitary would be down underneath of all that. It's not on this particular section right here. But you can see it being located here, it's in a good strategic location so that when it receives particular sensory inputs, it's able to transmit those to higher parts of the brain and everything else so that you can get recognition. I mean, what's the best way to, if you're cold, what's the best way to figure out you're cold? You get these receptors coming into the hypothalamus, it tells the cerebrum and cerebellum, do something. Cerebellum, like the motor activity, so you shiver and everything, and the cerebrum's going to tell, hey, dummy, go get a blanket. Okay, so you can take care of that, okay? Now, this is just a cross-section showing you what we just talked about as far as these areas are concerned. Turn this around here some. And you can see there, you can see the pituitary underneath of there. On this one, so right above it, you can see the portions that are considered to be the hypothalamus. Okay? And the hypothalamus goes up along the lateral sides of the third ventricle. Okay, so it's very, very closely communicated with the third ventricle, and is that important? That's one of the ways that we transmit stuff is through cerebral spinal fluid, right? And so it helps do that. This is just a diagram that's showing you the relationship of the hypothalamus to the pituitary. If you look up here, we can see the mammary body is, mammary body's up here, the optic chiasma's back here, and here is the ventricle right here. You can see it. Hypothalamus goes up around like this, and it has this stalk down here. This is the infundibulum, which goes into the pituitary stalk. Okay? And so that's how it is in there. These are just showing you some of the important aspects as far as the nuclei. Now, what are nuclei as far as nervous system are concerned? They're accumulations of neuronal cell bodies, aren't they? And they usually have specific functions that are unique to them. And if we look at this, some of our main nuclei, here are the optic tracts right here. Here's the superoptic nuclei over top of that. The paraventricular nucleus is in here. The reason those two are important is because those are the ones that go down into the neurohypophysis and supply the ADH and the oxytocin. Come from there. but there's numerous other nuclei present in here and under here, which most of them will send signals directly down into the vascular system, and then the vascular system will deliver them to the anterior pituitary. This diagram right here is just showing, this is the optic tracts right here, this dark purple. Right here, this little areas right here, that's the supraoptic nuclei. Here are the paraventricular nuclei right here, and down in here is the arcuate nucleus, which also sends things down as far as the pituitary is concerned. Okay? Now, as far as these tissue, what is the hypothalamus? It's nervous tissue, right? So what's it going to have in it? Neurons, and then you have your microbial cells, and then you have your fibers, right? So this is the paraventricular nucleus right here on an H&E section. You can see the neurons and everything. And this is a particularly histochemical stain, immunohistochemical stain for vasopressin, or ADH. And so the cells which are staining with this immunodye are responsible for secreting vasopressin. Now some of them don't stain. Some of the neurons in that won't stain because they will secrete oxytocin. They used to think that the paraventricular secreted one and supraoptic secreted another, and they found out that they both secrete the same thing, but the paraventricular has a little more of the ADH cell secretion in it. This is just this is the not para, but peri, P-E-R-I, ventricular nucleus right here. And you can see, again, this nervous tissue over here. And this is, over here is the immunohistochemical staining for corticotropic releasing hormone, CRH. Anybody know what CRH causes the pituitary to secrete? ACTH. Okay, the corticotropes are mainly, the other cells in the pituitary secrete ACTH, but the corticotropes are the main ones which do it. Okay. And so you can't just look at the H&E section and say, oh yeah, this is secrete such and such. That's why you have to do this immunohistochemical staining and everything. I think Graham has been going through a good bit of that stuff you're on the path, right? All these different stains. Okay. All right, now, as far as the components of the hypothalamus, we have the rostral or supraoptic portion, and this basically contains various nuclei, including the supraoptic and the paraventricular nuclei, which, as I say, main components of the neuroepiphysis. You have the middle or tuberal portion, and this has various nuclei which secrete all those releasing hormones, stimulating hormones for the pituitary, and also some of them are inhibitory. And it consists of also the tuber cinereum, and that's the thing that goes down and forms an infundibular stalk. It ends eventually in a tube-shaped process, as we say, the median eminence or the infundibular stalk, which attaches to the neurohypophysis of the pituitary gland. In other words, there's a direct connection with the neurohypophysis because the secretory cells of that are located in that paraventricular supraoptic nuclei, and their axons go down into the neurohypophysis, and the axons end down there. So that's where we have a neuroendocrine type thing, and that is not really a true endocrine organ as we think within epithelial cells, this type of thing. It has the neurons, so it's neuroendocrine types of organ. Okay. Then we have the caudal or mammillary portion, and this has the nuclei of origin for the mammillothalamic tracts, and these are very important as far as regulating responses to various chemoreceptors, oligoreceptors, and all that type of thing going on. This is just a diagram showing you the components. The circle areas are showing you the caudal or mammillary portion, the rostral or supraoptic portion, the middle portion there, which is the tubular portion. Okay, and you can see the neurohypophysis and down at the bottom, the posterior pituitary, and a little bit of the adenohypophysis down there. And this is just a diagram that doesn't have zeros in there. It's the same one as one before, but it doesn't have the round areas. It shows you the actual structures as far as what's going on here. And again, it's very fortuitously located because it can communicate with all other areas of the brain and also with the pituitary. Okay, now, actually hypothalamus is kind of synonymous with homeostasis because basically it's mainly involved in maintaining homeostasis as far as the animal's body is concerned. It has numerous vital functions that are related directly or indirectly to the regulation of your vegetative, hormonal, and behavioral processes. And these are essential to the survival of its individual organism. Now, as a result of its functions, it's critical to the maintenance of the body. All right? And to achieve its functions, it has to be able to receive inputs about the body state from various receptors, this type of thing, and then it has to be able to compensate for these changes it's detecting, either directly or by affecting the autonomic nervous system, affecting the upper brain, or the pituitary, as far as its responses. This is just showing you the hypothalamus. You can see some of the sensations that come in, the emotional state, visceral sensation. Again, right now I think it's cold in here, so I'm getting these visual sensations going up here saying, hey, you know, maybe I'll wear long sleeves next time, okay? This type of thing. And you can see how the hypothalamus can communicate and basically send these stimuli to the thalamus up into the cerebral cortex so you get awareness of it. You can go into the autonomic nervous system so you can adjust things like vascular constriction for blood flow or blood pressure, all this type of thing. And the pituitary gland so that you can get your various hormones released, such as the thyroid stimulating hormone, the ACTH and all this, so that the individual can then respond to whatever the stimuli they're coming into. Okay? But let's say if you've got something that you know that you've got danger approaching, what are you going to have to be able to tell the thyroid gland? Give me some good thyroid hormone, because thyroid hormone is necessary for the normal motor activity and everything else, because it provides gets energy and everything as far as the things are concerned. So you can run, right? Or you can fight, right? Preferably I run, but I can't run very good anymore, so sometimes I don't have a choice. Okay? Okay, so the hypothalamus receives direct input via various specific receptors. You all had these as far as thermoreceptors, osmoreceptors, right? You all found those in anatomy?
No.
Well, you all knew about them in anatomy, right? Now, the thermoreceptors, their neurons in the anterior hypothalamus respond to heat by initiating peripheral vasodilatation and sweating. Why do you want to vasodilatate? Because that's going to get the vessels up here so you get more flow of heat out from those vessels to go out of the body, right? Also, it can help neurons in the posterior hypothalamus respond to cold by initiating shivering, piloerection, and peripheral vasoconstriction. Why would you want to have peripheral vasoconstriction?
So you don't lose the heat.
Where do you want the heat to be mainly affecting?
Your core.
Internal organs and everything. So basically it keeps them at a temperature that's functioning. Okay. Now the osmoreceptors, what's osmoreceptor mean? What's osmolarity?
The concentration of water in its belly.
It's not so much the concentration of water, it's the concentration of solids in the
The
water.
solids of water.
Okay. What's the normal osmolarity of blood?
300?
That's the mean. What's the range?
290 something?
280 to 320. And they respond to increases in your blood osmolarity. Why is it important to be able to do that? What if you have hyperosmolarity in the blood? What's that going to do? Going to pull fluid out of the tissues. What's going to happen to blood pressure? Blood like crazy and everything. What if you're hypoosmolar? What's that going to interfere with?
Hypo is going to go
You
out.
lose the water. You get edema and all that kind of stuff. Okay? And so the osmoreceptors will respond to increase in blood osmolarity by releasing antidiuretic hormone. Why would you want to release that?
So you
If
can
your blood is too concentrated, what do you want to put in there? Water in there. What does ADH do?
get it back from the renal.
What it does is it goes down and opens pores in the epithelial walls of the collecting ducts predominantly. Because can water really go through a cell membrane very well? So it opens up the pores, and then that hyperosmolarity on the other side pulls the water in. What controls that hyperosmolarity?
Countercurrent?
Aldosterone. Okay, so I gotta start thinking endo. Okay, we're endocrinology, so you think endo when we talk about this stuff. Okay. Now this antidiuretic hormone comes from the supraoptic nucleus, but mainly and also from the paraventricular nucleus, and it's going to be secreted by the posterior pituitary into the blood, and it's going to transport down. It also causes afferent arterial vasoconstriction. Why would you want that to happen? That's one of the best ways to increase blood pressure, especially in afferent arterioles. And also, what's the best way not to lose water in the kidney? Don't allow it to get there in the first place. Okay, so you have those types of things. And increasing your constriction is going to increase your blood pressure, right? So remember all that physiology, right? Okay. Now it also will stimulate neurons in the thirst center and the lateral hypothalamus to tell you, go get something to drink. Okay, so it increases water intake that way. All right. It also helps regulate energy balance, and that neurons in your arcuate nucleus, when it was on the bottom, they sense blood glucose and other hormone levels in there. And so that can tell whatever necessary to, come on, we need to do this type of secretion so we can maintain this. Now, it also receives indirect inputs from the blood and nerves. Indirect inputs from the bloodstream include information about the temperature, the osmotic pressure, the hormone concentration, including some things like leptin, cortisol, estrogens, progesterone, androgens, etc. Okay. Now, indirect neural inputs are coming in from visceral somatic sensory neurons, the limbic system, and the reticular activating system. You know, all the limbic system and all that kind of thing. So can you see how important the hypothalamus is? Do you think you could survive very long without it? No. You'd be a vegetable, basically, but that's something. Okay, now, the main hypothalamic sites that receive input, these aren't all of them by any stretch, but these are some of the more prevalent ones. The nucleus of the solitary tract, that collects visceral sensory information, including blood pressure and gut distension. Okay, because if you have gut distension, what does that tell you you've got to start doing? Digesting food, right? So you're going to have to get those enzymes and everything going down there. Okay? Has reticular formation that receives inputs from the spinal cord, and that includes things like skin temperature, this type of thing. The suprachiasmatic nucleus, it receives fibers directly from the optic nerve, and it helps regulate circadian rhythms and couple them with light dark cycles. It is very closely associated with the what? The pineal gland, as far as that's concerned. We have the circumventricular organ. This lacks a blood-brain barrier. Why would you want that to happen? What else? What if you ingest a toxin? And if you had a blood-brain, what's going to stimulate vomition? Stimulating these centers up here to say this is something we want to get rid of. So if that thing had to go through the blood-brain barrier, could you maybe die before you do that? And so this helps the any change in toxins and things like that. It can detect them to say, hey, vomit. Don't get rid of these things. And also tells the brain up here, hey, dummy, don't go eat that thing again. Although sometimes it doesn't get through very well to some dogs, because I've seen dogs eat, throw up, go back and eat the same thing again, throw up again. Anyway, okay. Now you have the limbic and olfactory systems. They receive input for regulating behavior such as eating and reproduction. I always thought it was kind of strange to put those two together, but I guess you got to eat if you're going to reproduce, and if you're going to reproduce, you eat, right? So that's just what it is.
For the circumventricular organ, since they're detecting if there's a toxin potentially, is there damage that occurs to that area over time?
It depends on what the toxin is, and what time, how often it's exposed to a toxin. But there are some of your severe toxins, which that's one way that they can get into the brain and cause damage. So hopefully, these terrorists and things won't come up with that stuff, but there are some problems with it. But one thing is the body can shut down the circumventricular organs if the rest of the brain senses there's something going on, then it can basically wall those areas off if it has to. Hopefully in time. Okay. We have basically our thermoreceptors and osmoreceptors, as we say, which monitor temperature and ionic balance respectively as far as the body is concerned. Okay, now major outputs. The biological clock. In other words, that light sensed by the retina causes stimulation of neurons in the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which stimulates the pineal gland, which releases what?
Melatonin.
Melatonin. Very good. You remember. Okay. Melatonin. Okay. They also have secretory neurons. The main ones like that, as we say, are ADH and oxytocin, and they are released by the supraoptic and paraventricular nucleus cell bodies. The axons descend down to the infundibular stalk and terminate down in the neurohypophysis or the posterior pituitary, and then they're stored down there, as we'll see later on. And so when there's a need for them, they release them, they go into the tissue and get picked up by the blood. Okay? So we've got those in there. So basically, the posterior pituitary is not really an endocrine organ, it's a storage site. But it's part of the neuroendocrine system in conjunction with the hypothalamus. Okay. Your other hypothalamic hormones, the various nuclei in there release numerous hormones, as we've said, that mainly stimulate, some will inhibit the secretions of the pituitary hormones predominantly. There's also in here, it has an intricate network of nuclei which interconnect with other areas of the nervous system. So the hypothalamus relays information to the cerebral cortex via the thalamus for conscious awareness, as we said. It also provides the interface between the autonomic nervous system and the endocrine system. Okay? And one of the things it also does, it will send direct on, it connects the autonomic nervous system, goes down, and goes into the adrenal medulla, and what's that going to cause the release of? Epinephrine and norepinephrine. Catecholamines. That's what the adrenal medulla does, right? And it's a little different in that where do epinephrine and norepinephrine usually work as far as the nervous system? They work on other nerves and things, don't they? Or they synapse on the thing and cause the response. It's a little different in this instance in that the postganglionic cells are those secretory cells in the medulla of the adrenal, which will release epinephrine and norepinephrine directly into the vascular supply. Okay, so it's a little bit different. That's why they call it neuroendocrine.